It's time to learn some history. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, where I take all the crazy unsolved mysteries of history and present them to you in an engaging way so you can easily understand them and hopefully go to sleep. Today we are looking at two mysteries that have just been solved this year: the Bronze Age murders of Denmark and the mystery of the woman who inspired Dracula. Let's jump into it. The first mystery we are covering today is the Bronze Age murders, a series of mysterious killings from over 3,400 years ago. During the Bronze Age in Denmark around 1300 BC, there was a mysterious killer or group of killers running around murdering people and leaving their bodies dumped in bogs. We know about these killings because of an archaeological site called Tollen Man, discovered in 1897 in a bog in northern Denmark. The man was found in remarkably good condition, complete with skin still attached to his bones and hair still attached to his head. He had also been brutally murdered, stabbed multiple times in the chest and stomach. At first, scientists assumed he must have been killed very recently, like maybe a few decades prior to his discovery. But after further examination, scientists now believe he was actually killed around 3,400 years ago. This makes him one of the oldest, well-preserved human bodies ever discovered in Europe. It also makes him a murder victim from the Bronze Age. But how did they kill him back then, and why? Who was he? These questions remained for over a century until just this past March when researchers finally got some answers. Researchers used new DNA technology to sequence the man's genome and compared his DNA to a group of 28 ancient individuals from the area between 3,800 and 2,800 BC. They found out that the man belonged to a group known as the Onetis culture, a Bronze Age culture that lived in Central and Northern Europe. He also had no close relatives in the area, suggesting he might have been an outsider. Finally, by examining his body, scientists noticed that he had healed wounds from broken bones, indicating that he may have been in a fight or an accident at some point in his life. One of the more brutal realities of life in the Bronze Age, according to Dr. Hennis Nitschke, a biomolecular archaeologist at the University of Copenhagen, was that even minor injuries could become life-threatening due to lack of access to modern medical care. In combination with this evidence, scientists now think that Tollen Man may have been murdered by members of the Onetis culture in a ritualistic killing, perhaps for being an outsider, or for practicing a different religion, or for simply being an enemy. For our next story, let's travel a little bit further into the future, specifically to 1476 AD in 1859. Researchers discovered a tomb in Transylvania, Romania, containing the remains of a boy and a girl who appeared to be brother and sister. The two were buried together in a wooden coffin inside a stone-built tomb with many grave goods such as dishes, cups, rings, toys, and jewelry. Archaeologists believe the two were part of a wealthy family because of the quantity and quality of the goods placed in their tomb. Despite this, we don't know their names. The only clue we have to their identity comes from a single inscription which reads, "In this coffin lies the body of the daughter of the dragon." The mystery surrounding the tomb led many to speculate that it could be the resting place of Vlad the Impaler and his sister, the inspiration for Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. The claim was even given credence by Alexander Luan, a Romanian historian who published a book arguing that Vlad the Impaler, not Vlad III, was the inspiration for Stoker's novel. Unfortunately, this theory was undermined when experts discovered that the inscription did unsay daughter of the dragon, but rather the daughter of the dragon. The mystery surrounding the two children remained until just this month when researchers finally uncovered the truth. Scientists used non-invasive X-ray technology to examine the remains of the two children without disturbing their burial. Through this, they discovered that the girl was around 14 years old when she died, making her too old to be Vlad the Impaler's sister. Further historical research revealed that the girl was actually Elizabeth Bathory, the daughter of a wealthy landowner, and that her brother's name was George. This means that the two children were unroyalty and therefore couldn't be Vlad the Impaler and his sister. However, this doesn't mean that the legend of Dracula isn't true. After all, there was a member of the royal family named Vlad the Impaler, and we know that he dipped his bread in blood, not dipped his sister in blood. See what I did there? Anyway, while this particular mystery has now been solved, other mysteries remain. Like, why does everyone keep trying to kill me? Or who keeps stealing my garlic? You want to hear me solve those mysteries? Then stay tuned for more boring history for sleep. In the heart of Europe during the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg was gripped by one of history's strangest medieval mysteries. As the warm days stretched on, something peculiar began to happen to the townspeople. Dozens of men and women were seen moving uncontrollably in the streets, as if possessed by an unseen force. Some stumbled and fell, victims of exhaustion, while others continued to dance until their bodies gave out, collapsing in heaps. Fear turned to panic as the afflicted grew in number, their strange movements becoming a terrifying spectacle for the people of Strasbourg. For centuries, this bizarre outbreak baffled historians who struggled to find a rational explanation. Medieval chroniclers, lacking the tools to understand such an oddity, turned to more superstitious means, suggesting that the people were cursed by witches or punished by God for their sins. In a desperate attempt to stop the outbreak, priests urged the afflicted to pray and seek God's forgiveness, hoping that divine intervention would halt the mysterious dancing. Town officials, perhaps in a more enlightened but no less misguided way, decided to fight fire with fire. They hired musicians to play lively tunes and encouraged the dancers to join them in a grand communal ballet. But this only made matters worse, as more and more people succumbed to the infectious rhythm and began dancing uncontrollably. This strange outbreak continued unabated for weeks, turning the streets of Strasbourg into a macabre dance floor where the living and the dying swayed to an unseen tune. It wasn't until modern scholars took up the puzzle that the mystery began to unravel. Today, historians propose two compelling theories to explain this bizarre episode. One points to ergot poisoning, a dangerous illness caused by a fungus that grows on damp rye bread. Ergot contains chemicals similar to LSD, which can induce hallucinations, spasms, and convulsions. These symptoms align eerily with the uncontrollable movements described in the historical accounts of Strasbourg. Imagine a community unknowingly consuming this tainted bread, each bite bringing them one step closer to a hallucinatory nightmare. The idea that the dancing plague was a result of mass ergot poisoning is supported by the fact that rye was a staple of the diet in 16th century Europe, and that the fungus grows best in damp, cool conditions, which were common in the region at the time. However, another theory suggests that the outbreak was not caused by a physical ailment, but rather by a mass psychogenic illness, also known as collective hysteria. This contagious psychological episode can occur when stress, fear, or despair grips a community, causing physical symptoms to manifest in those who are susceptible. In the case of Strasbourg, the people were suffering from a combination of famine, disease, and crushing poverty. These dire conditions created an atmosphere of despair that could have primed the population for a mass psychogenic illness. When one woman began dancing, others may have unconsciously mimicked her movements, their own fears and stresses bubbling to the surface. This could explain why some observers reported seeing the dancers in a trance-like state, as if their minds were elsewhere. The theory also aligns with the fact that the outbreak started and ended suddenly, without any clear external trigger. While the exact cause of the dancing plague may never be pinpointed, these theories offer a compelling explanation for this disturbing episode in history. What began as a baffling mystery has become a fascinating intersection of medicine, psychology, and history. The dancing plague is a haunting reminder of how fragile the human body and mind can be when pushed to their limits. In the end, the people of Strasbourg were not cursed by witches or punished by God, but rather were victims of their time and circumstance. Whether the plague was caused by poisonous rye or mass hysteria, it was a product of the difficult conditions that the people faced. Their story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of extreme stress and the importance of understanding the root causes of societal problems. As we reflect on this dark chapter of history, let us remember the lessons it holds. Let us strive to create a world where people are not driven to the brink of madness by desperate circumstances, and where the mysteries of the past are solved not by superstition, but by reason and understanding. The dancing plague may be a story from centuries ago, but its implications are timeless. It reminds us that we must address the sources of fear, despair, and hopelessness in our society, for when people are pushed to the edge, even their very minds can betray them. It also teaches us the importance of empathy and understanding. Those who danced in the streets of Strasbourg were not possessed by demons, but were suffering from a real and terrible affliction. We must approach the study of history with sensitivity and compassion, recognizing that those who lived in the past were human beings just like us, capable of both great things and terrible tragedies. So let us remember the dancing plague not just as a bizarre historical curiosity, but as a profound lesson in human nature. Let it be a reminder of the power of the human mind and the importance of addressing the root causes of societal problems. Only then can we hope to create a better future for ourselves and prevent such tragedies from happening again. Thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe for more historical tales. And if you'd like to learn more about the fascinating world of historical mysteries, make sure to check out our other content. In 1483, two young princes disappeared inside the Tower of London, never to be seen again. Their uncle, Richard III, had just seized the throne from their father, Edward IV, and was now ruling England. Suspicion immediately fell on him, and rumors spread that he had ordered the princes murdered to secure his crown. But despite the salacious details and gossipy pamphlets, no one could prove it. Were the princes dead or alive? Had Richard III really ordered their deaths? Or was he an innocent victim of vicious rumors? It would become one of England's most enduring medieval mysteries. The story is a tangle of politics, legend, and Tudor propaganda. After the princes vanished, their mother, Elizabeth Woodville, accused Richard III of murdering them. Her story was sensational and shocking. The princes were last seen alive on June 1483, when they were brought to the Tower of London for their own protection, supposedly falling victim to their uncle's murderous plot soon thereafter. Bodies were found, she said, and disposed of in the nearby river. Over the next few months, Londoners pulled bodies out of the Thames, but none matched the princes. And though Elizabeth had enough time to launch a full-scale investigation, she didn't. Historians speculate she wanted to keep control of the narrative and protect her own position. In the end, Richard III would hold the throne for only 9 months before dying in battle against Henry Tudor, who went on to establish the Tudor dynasty. With the princes dead, or so everyone assumed, the story seemed closed. But in 1674, workmen at the Tower of London unearthed a wooden box containing 2 small skeletons. Suddenly, the princes were back in the headlines. The bones were first taken to the nearby church of St. Margaret, then moved to Westminster Abbey, where they remain today. Though their identity is still officially unknown, the general consensus among historians is that they are the lost princes. This is mainly due to the work of one man, Sir Walter Besant, who published The Mystery of the Two Princes in 1874. Besant argued that the skeleton of one prince was definitely male, not female as some have suggested, and that both skeletons were the right age. He also discounted a rumor that the bodies were switched during the exhumation of 1674. In short, Besant claimed that we can be certain, not a doubt can be entertained, not only that the 2 little figures are those of princes, but that these 2 princes were Edward V and Richard III. Other historians disagree. They're more cautious about drawing conclusions without scientific evidence. Since the bones are still sealed by royal order, only limited analysis has been possible. Tests conducted in the 1930s and 70s found that one skeleton showed signs of trauma to the head, but it was too fragmented to tell if this was from an attack or a fall. A complete DNA profile was made in 2019, but it has never been released to the public. Various members of the British and German royal families have offered to provide samples for comparison, but the monarchy has declined, citing security concerns. Officially, the case remains open, but the balance of opinion has shifted away from the princes being unidentified. Most historians accept that these are Edward V and Richard III, even if proof is scant. Recent scholarship, however, has challenged the idea that Richard III was behind their deaths. Hilary Mantel, author of the best-selling Wolf Hall novels, argues that Richard III was innocent. Instead, Mantel believes that Henry VII had more to gain by eliminating his rivals. The princes were legitimate heirs to the throne, making them potential threats to Henry's dynasty. Mantle says that while Richard III may have benefited from the prince's deaths, it was not in his character to murder little boys. She adds, "We don't know what happened to the princes, but we do know who had most to lose by their survival." In 2020, a history. Com article reported that 2 independent genetic tests showed the remains in Westminster Abbey were almost certainly those of the 2 princes. These tests were not approved by the British monarchy, which continues to prohibit full DNA testing. Nonetheless, the results are thought to lend credence to the theory that the princes were killed to clear the way for their uncle, Richard III, to take the throne. After all these years, the mystery of the princes in the tower is not solved in the courtroom sense. There's no smoking gun or death certificate. But layer after layer of historical fiction and propaganda have been peeled away. And now a new story is emerging. The princes in the tower are remembered as victims of their uncle's murderous plot, but history may have gotten that part wrong. Richard III may have been innocent, another casualty of the brutal politics of medieval succession. Whatever the truth, the story continues to echo through the centuries, a reminder of how even the most powerful people are not safe from those who want the crown. Thanks for watching. The year is 1307. Where in medieval Europe would you stash your treasure? How about in plain sight? Tucked away in a church until the heat death of the universe itself, right? Well, French King Philip IV thought so. And when he decided to crush the Knights Templar, a holy order founded to protect pilgrims on their way to the Holy Land, he assumed they'd be stashing sacks of gold in their buildings across his kingdom. He was wrong, totally and hilariously wrong. But why? What happened to all of their treasure? Did they lose it? Did they hide it? Are they secretly spending it on avocado toast? We sent a team to find out. What we found was actually pretty boring. A lot of armor, some tools, farming equipment, a few arrowheads. No treasure. But while real treasure may have been a bust, historians have uncovered what may be the biggest pile of BS in human history. For centuries, stories swirled about the Knights Templar, the powerful medieval order of warrior monks who were suddenly crushed by King Philip IV of France in 1307. Legend claimed they hid an enormous treasure before their arrest. Gold, relics, and perhaps even the Holy Grail itself. The disappearance of their wealth became one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. But recent discoveries suggest the treasure was never about piles of gold. Scholars now believe the treasure was financial and logistical power, ledgers, banking systems, and documents that gave the Templars incredible influence. But how did a holy order of warrior monks become such powerful bankers? To answer that question, we went straight to the source. Oh, hello, sorry, didn't see you there. Back to the Templars. Founded in 1118, the order originally set out to protect pilgrims on their way to the Holy Land. But as the centuries passed and donations poured in, they evolved into something different. By the late Middle Ages, most Templars weren't fighting in the Holy Land at all. They were building a financial empire across Europe. And like any good bankers, they made strategic investments in property. By the mid-12th century, they owned over 1,000 farms, vineyards, watermills, and entire cities. They also had tons of debts owed by kings. These royal debtors were often happy to let the Templars take an interest in their land, because it meant they didn't have to pay back what they owed. As historian Dan Jones points out, this gave the Templars an awful lot of leverage over the kings of Europe. In fact, by the end of the 13th century, the Templars were one of the largest landowners in France, England, and Spain. So, when Philip IV decided to arrest the Templars in 1307, he knew that seizing their lands would make him incredibly wealthy. But what about the treasure? Where were all those fabled chests of gold? The thing is, there probably never were any. According to legend, the Templars hid their treasure in a vault beneath the Temple Church in London. But archaeologists who dug up the site in the 19th century found nothing but a few old shoes and a broken tooth. It's more likely that the treasure was never physical in the first place. Instead of gold, the Templars' real wealth was their financial instruments. The ledgers and documents that proved they owned what would today be considered a very respectable chunk of Europe. Philip IV realized this and acted accordingly. When he seized the Templars' assets, he didn't send in men with wheelbarrows to cart the gold away. He took the ledgers. With these in hand, he declared himself the new owner of all Templar property and promptly set about seizing it. His agents rode across Europe seizing Templar buildings, farms, and vineyards and carting off the contents. Works of art were ripped from their frames, books were torn from their bindings, and anything of value was shipped off to the royal treasury. And what wasn't valuable, well, that got burned. By the end of 1308, every Templar building in France was a smoldering ruin except for 4 that Philip chose to keep as his own personal palaces. As for the Templars themselves, he didn't exactly know what to do with them. Though he initially planned to hang every Templar as a heretic, he quickly changed his mind. Instead, he pardoned them, confiscated their property, and kicked them out onto the streets. Many fled to the Holy Land, while others lived out their days as beggars. Still, despite their fall from grace, the Templars' true treasure endured, absorbed into the coffers of European monarchs who once owed them debts. As historian John Gillingham put it, there was no great Templar treasure for the king to find. There was no secret hiding place. But perhaps the biggest irony is that by destroying the Templars, Philip IV destroyed a financial system that he himself had depended upon. Without the Templars' organizational skills and legal authority, Europe's economy suffered. Royal debtors defaulted on their loans, trade across the continent slowed, and Philip's own financial situation went from bad to hilariously worse. His successors spent the next century paying off the debts that the Templars had so carefully managed. So while the treasure may have been a bust, the consequences of its loss are very real. And who knows, maybe one day we'll discover a secret vault full of gold under a church somewhere? Wouldn't that be neat? Oh, wait, never mind, it's just a bunch of farming equipment. Ho-hum. In the summer of 1348, a horrifying new disease began ripping through Europe's major cities. Within weeks, it killed hundreds, then hundreds of thousands more. And within months, it would claim an estimated 30 to 50 million lives across the continent. But while the medieval world knew it was under attack by something called the Black Death, they had absolutely no idea where it came from or why it was so devastating. Where did this plague come from? Why did it kill so many? And why is it still considered one of the most mysterious diseases in history? For centuries, theories about the plague's origins were as numerous as its victims. Some said it was a punishment from God for the sins of man. Others blamed poisonous wells or bad air. But medieval people weren't the only ones grasping for answers. Even modern historians have debated where the plague came from. And while no one knows for sure, recent genetic studies may have finally cracked this centuries-old case. In 2022, scientists announced that they had identified the source of the plague with remarkable accuracy. And it turns out the Black Death didn't start in Europe at all. It came from Central Asia, specifically the Tanshan region near the border of modern-day Kyrgyzstan. To reach this conclusion, scientists took ancient DNA from 316 skeletons unearthed at a medieval cemetery in England. They focused on those who died during the first year of the plague outbreak. And when they analyzed the genetic material of the plague bacterium found in the skeletons, they made a remarkable discovery. The strain of Yersinia pestis found in these remains was almost identical to the earliest strain of the plague ever identified in human remains. And it turns out that strain originated somewhere in the Chanshan region. So how did a disease from Central Asia wipe out millions in Europe? Well, as it turns out, the Black Death began with trade. The culprit was the Silk Road. Along with silk, spices, and other goods, it carried fleas and rats, which carried the plague. Merchants, soldiers, and travelers unknowingly picked up these vermin while traversing the trade routes and carried them unwittingly to new destinations. By 1347, the disease had reached the Mediterranean ports of Sicily and France. From there, it exploded across Europe. But why did the plague explode in Europe? After all, the disease had been around for years. According to modern science, 3 factors turned the Black Death into a super plague. First, the population density of medieval cities. Most people lived in cities, which provided the perfect environment for rats to thrive. Second, poor hygiene. Medieval people didn't wash their hands before eating, and they rarely bathed, which helped the disease spread. And third, a weakened immune system. Years of famine had weakened the immune systems of medieval people, making them more susceptible to disease. In short, the Black Death was a product of biology meeting human vulnerability. It wasn't a supernatural curse nor a punishment from God. It was the result of natural processes that happened when humans lived in close proximity to other animals and did understand the basics of hygiene and nutrition. Though the plague's mystery has been solved, its shadow still lingers in history. The Black Death was one of the most horrible disasters in human history. But despite its horrific toll on life, it profoundly affected the course of human history. The plague contributed to the decline of feudalism in Europe. It led to the Renaissance, Reformation, and the Age of Exploration. Without the Black Death, our world would be a very different place today. In fact, the effects of the plague are still being felt in modern China. One of the biggest killers during the plague outbreak was the local government. When the plague hit China in the 14th century, the authorities tried to contain it by locking down major cities. Sound familiar? Well, some historians believe that the Chinese government's response to the COVID pandemic was directly inspired by the playbook used during the Black Death. So what can we learn from this dark chapter in human history? For one, the Black Death shows that even the most powerful empires are vulnerable to disease. It also demonstrates the importance of understanding and addressing the root causes of disease, such as poverty and inequality. Finally, the plague reminds us of the interconnectedness of all people. The Black Death didn't respect national borders. It was a global pandemic that killed millions across continents. It is a lesson that we need to remember in today's world where diseases can spread rapidly across the globe. The Black Death was a tragedy on a massive scale, but it's also a story of resilience. The survivors of the plague rebuilt their lives and created a new world order. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can endure. The mystery of the Black Death has captivated scholars for centuries. Where did it come from? Why was it so deadly? Though recent discoveries have shed light on these questions, one thing remains certain: the plague's impact on history is undeniable. Now watch. Worst plagues in history, or check out? For centuries, the Voynich Manuscript was history's greatest mystery. Now modern science may have finally cracked the case wide open. Few medieval artifacts have baffled scholars as much as this strange book. It contains over 200 pages filled with unknown writing, bizarre plants, and mysterious diagrams. It resisted all attempts at translation and seemed to have no explanation. Was it a code? A lost language? A hoax? Now, computational linguistics may have provided an answer that nobody expected. In a recent study, 2 Italian researchers took a new look at the Voynich text using advanced algorithms designed to analyze big data. These programs search for patterns in writing, which can reveal things like the frequency of certain words and how often they appear together. This kind of analysis is perfect for large bodies of writing like novels or the Bible, but applying it to the Voynich manuscript was risky. If the book was gibberish, the computer would simply confirm that. But if there was any real pattern to the writing, the algorithm would hopefully reveal it. And fortunately, the results were clear. According to the analysis, the manuscript's text does have real patterns, consistent with how words and phrases are put together in natural languages. This suggests it isn't gibberish but encodes genuine meaning. The author writes, "The existence of semantic constraints strongly suggests that we are not dealing with a meaningless or accidental arrangement of signs. In other words, the computer found evidence of real language, just written in a way that was highly obscured." The findings were published in the journal Scientific Reports in January 2023, and while the article doesn't propose a translation, it does lend credence to a theory proposed by some scholars since the 1970s. They argued that the manuscript was written in a shorthand form of medieval Latin or based on a Romance dialect, obscured by the use of unique symbols instead of letters. Other scholars have suggested that the Voynich manuscript was more than just a book, specifically a medical and herbal manual. The author writes, this hypothesis is loosely based on the observation that many of the illustrated plants present in the codex have been identified as medicinal herbs. What's more, some of the strange illustrations do match known medieval remedies. For example, this drawing appears to show mandrake, a root used in folk medicine to induce abortions. Medieval healers used mandrake with caution, however, because it could cause adverse effects. And this apparent warning about the plant's dangers lends credence to the theory that the entire manuscript was written in code to avoid persecution. According to this theory, the author was a learned healer who used a cipher to disguise their knowledge, perhaps to protect their work from rivals or inquisitors. The Voynich Manuscript was written sometime between 1400 and 1500 AD, a period when medical texts were often targeted by censors, and the use of a secret code was common among those who dealt in sensitive knowledge. The author writes, "The secrecy surrounding the transmission of knowledge was a common practice in early modern Europe among alchemists, Rosicrucians, and other esoteric circles. So while the exact meaning of the Voynich Manuscript remains a mystery, modern science has finally solved the mystery of who wrote it, at least according to one popular theory. It was a medieval healer trying to protect their knowledge from those who would persecute them for it. But whether it's a medical manual, a hoax, or something else entirely, there's no denying that the Voynich Manuscript is one of the greatest medieval riddles ever uncovered. It's a reminder that the past is never truly lost, only waiting for the right tools to decode it. And maybe, just maybe, we're finally up to the task. Thank you for watching. And if you want to support our channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. Your support helps us bring these videos to a wider audience. So thank you for watching.